Hello and welcome to this week's show of Weighted Donuts. I'm Wayne Unger. I'm here with my co-host Craig Stier. Craig, how are you tonight?
I'm fine, Wayne. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. And tonight we have a returning guest, Jared Sandler. Jared, welcome and thank you for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm glad to be back.
So, Jared, I mean, listen, you're based in Texas. You are the Texas Rangers. You do their radio play-by-play. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do pre and post, and we'll do some play-by-play as well.
Okay, excellent. So, that being said, we were just talking about Pudge Rodriguez. So, and he, I think, he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. You said there was a small minority of whispers out in Texas about, his alleged perceived PED use, but I tell you, to me, later on, you look at his numbers. I mean, he was, he was sturdy. I mean, he played all the time, and even in later years, like when he went to Florida, okay, for that 1 year, he transformed that team. Oh, there were other players there, but he was like the steadying hand. To me, I felt, and I felt as though he did the same thing for Detroit when he went to Detroit. What's your, what can you say? What do you want to say about Pudge?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, he was a part of the first wave of players who I remember watching growing up. So I didn't have the privilege of watching in real time Johnny Bench or Pudge Fisk or any of the other great catchers, but in watching old footage and talking to people, it's pretty apparent that you either think if you can put whatever allegations have been levied against him aside, I don't know anyone that's ever said that he's any worse than one of the three best catchers of all time. And I know a lot of people feel like he's number two right behind Johnny Bench. And there are things that, and I don't know that that's even conclusive. I think, that there are things that Pudge Rodriguez did better than Johnny Bench, and things that Johnny Bench I'm sure did better than Pudge. But he was an incredible player, definitely a leader. It seemed on all the clubs of which he was a part. You mentioned what he did in his brief time in Miami with the Florida Marlins. What he did with Detroit and having worked in Michigan for 3 years. The way people spoke about Pudge certainly indicates that he had a big impact. Same with the Rangers. He was a leader. He came to the Rangers organization as a 16-year-old who, couldn't even order a cheeseburger from McDonald's. He didn't know the language. And, the catching position is a position that is naturally of leadership responsibilities. And the way he grew and became a part of not just the fabric of the organization, but it became a part of the community for someone who wasn't American. English wasn't his first language. I think not only did he connect with his teammates and pitchers, but he connected with fans. And not to necessarily juxtapose Pudge with Juan Gonzalez in a negative light for Juan, but Juan never really did that. Those two were kind of their own version of the Bash brothers in some ways with the Rangers. Juan, like Pudge, did not speak English as his first language, and Juan never quite made the same connection with fans that Pudge did. But, he's a guy that was, unbelievable on both sides of the ball. And a tremendous catcher. It was electric. I don't know anyone else. I don't know anyone who is another player for whom people have said their highlight in going to a game was watching him throw out runners. I mean, it just, stealing is not that big, that big a part of the game. It's such a small part, and there's a chance that you go and Pudge doesn't make any throws at all. But when he would do it, it was remarkable. And you mentioned his durability, and I think that when you mentioned the durability, you talk about Pudge playing for different teams, and I think he ended up playing for 6 different organizations. I do think that that's one thing that Rangers fans think back on, that Doug Melvin, as great of a baseball man as he is, he made a mistake on Pudge's durability, his longevity. The Rangers let Pudge go because they didn't think he'd be able to hold up behind the plate. And, typically catchers don't hold up. Typically catchers of Pudge's size don't hold up the way he did. But he certainly proved Doug Melvin wrong and proved a lot of people wrong with the way he was able to extend his career after playing with the Rangers. And I do think that while participation should not be considered, the gold standard or anything, you're not in this for participation trophies. He not only participated, but participated at a high level. But I do think for that position specifically, the ability to remain durable is quite remarkable, and Pudge did just that.
Yeah, well, it was pretty thorough. Craig, anything you'd like to add?
Well, the eyes of the eyes of baseball are on Texas tonight. Not just Pudge, but Jeff Bagwell from the Astros. I think it's interesting that these two guys. I feel. I always thought they were both Hall of Famers, but the scent of PED use and whatnot would make both of their elections to the Hall of Fame interesting. Did you ever doubt for a second that Pudge would make it on the first ballot, Jared?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A week ago, it just wasn't looking good. I think he was above the 75% threshold, well above it for ballots that we had known, but that number kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And it wasn't really until this past weekend when I think there were 15 ballots released and 13 or 14 of them had Pudge's name on it, that I think a lot of us felt like this was actually going to be the year. And even still, it was a coin flip. A lot of people. I was actually at a community event with several Rangers players and some staff members, and when 4:58 rolled around Central Time, we were all hanging on our phones waiting for the announcement, a few minutes later. So I don't know that there was really any doubt that Pudge would eventually make it, because he didn't seem to be in that group of players like Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens, who just seemed to receive, while it is improving, not nearly enough support. But I do think that, there was a question, and unfairly so, as to whether or not Pudge was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. To me, if he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, then I guess I'm just confused what exactly a first ballot Hall of Famer looks like. I thought it was ridiculous that Ken Griffey Jr. didn't get 100% of the votes. I guess I kind of, in a weird way, understand a guy like Pudge not getting 100% of the votes because of allegations made against him. But, I guess I'm not sure what would have changed from this year to next year as far as his Hall of Fame candidacy. This is a Hall of Famer. You watch him play. This is a Hall of Fame player. We're not talking about, one of the 10 best players at his position all time. Like I mentioned, and like a lot of people seem to agree about, we're talking about one of the 2 or 3 best players at one of the most difficult positions in all sports. And to me, he deserved to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He talked about how proud he was to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. The only catcher to do so, in addition to Johnny Bench, who was Pudge's hero growing up. Pudge's favorite player and his hero, someone he's talked about a lot, is Johnny Bench. And he got a little emotional talking about how proud he was to be in that class, to be one of 2 catchers all time, to be inducted on their first try along with Johnny Bench.
I totally agree with you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. First ballot Hall of Fame.
Do you think that if Bud Selig was not elected to the Hall by the Veterans Committee, do you think it would have been more difficult for Pudge this year?
I don't know. That's interesting. Whether or not Bud Selig's induction kind of gave people a green light to welcome someone like Pudge in, who never was found to be guilty of anything, but was mentioned by Jose Canseco, who, as much of a kook as that guy appears to be, he actually has been right on a lot of these things. So, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that I know with, my life riding on the line that Pudge was clean. People can do their own math and come up with their own conclusions. But, I frankly, while I don't think it's black and white, I do think these things can be adjudicated, if you will, on a case-by-case basis. I am of the opinion that this just happened to be a big part of the era of baseball, and that all these guys that were tested positive and guys who, have nothing more than perhaps a rumor, an allegation, deserve consideration. The Hall of Fame to me is not only, an honor that represents, the highest achievement on an individual level, but it very much tells the story of baseball. It's a baseball museum, and that doesn't mean that everyone should get in, not to diminish the level of achievement it takes to be a part of this museum. But the reality is, the Hall of Fame still is not including some of the greatest players of their generation. No matter how they went about doing it, it does appear in retrospect that there were enough players that took part in whatever sort of performance-enhancing supplements that, I don't have a percentage, I don't have a number, but there seem to be enough who took part that we know of, which means that there's even more of whom we don't know. That's just a part of the era. That is a part of what defines the era, for better from an entertainment side, and for worse from the ethical side. And Selig being in there, frankly. Oh, go ahead.
And we're pretty sure he's going to go on as a Texas Ranger and not a New York Yankee, correct?
Correct. Yeah, he said he'll go.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I have no problem with any of the guys getting in there.
Do you remember? Wayne. Do you remember when the few months he was with the Yankees and he had nothing left? It was sad.
Yeah, I remember because I was actually interning with the Rangers, and I walked by him, and I'm not a very tall guy. But I was actually taller than Pudge, and I was amazed at this guy that I grew up rooting for, and he was one of my favorite players. I was actually taller than him. I'm a little taller than 5'7", and Pudge is probably right around 5'7".
I'm guessing that Tim Raines isn't much taller than that either.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I saw that Tim Raines was listed at like 5'9", but you never know when someone's listed at something that you usually got to subtract an inch or two.
Jared, what's your take on Tim Raines? 'Cause I can tell you, I think Wayne and I have spoken about this in the past. I loved Raines, and I remember when he first was on the ballot. He didn't even come close to 20. It was less than 25%, and he steadily, his percentage went up, and then it dipped 1 year, and it always bummed me out because. I don't know why. It's not because I'm a Yankee fan. I loved him on the Yankees. I really liked him. I really liked his game, and he was an exciting ball player. And the fact that there was a chance that he was going to make the Hall of Fame really bummed me out. So I know I'm pretty happy that he made it. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, my memories of Tim Raines start when he was in the stretch run of his career with the White Sox before going to the Yankees, and that's my real lucid memories of Tim Raines are those with the Yankees. So I miss the great years with Montreal, the All-Star seasons with Montreal, where I think he might have had one top 5 MVP finish, but you look at some of the numbers and comparisons to other players who both are in the Hall of Fame and others who are not, and it seemed like Tim Raines certainly fit there. He didn't necessarily have some of the really sexy numbers like home runs that we like to use as a measuring stick, but there are other things he did: the stolen bases, the batting average, getting on base at an incredibly high rate with the walks, and what he did as a leadoff hitter. So And I'm a big fan of Jonah Carey's, and Jonah Carey's probably championed the Tim Raines Hall of Fame cause more than anyone else. So I'm excited. I'm happy for Tim Raines, and seems that he's pretty excited about it too. So that's good. I had zero issue, and I was kind of pulling for Tim Raines to get in this year.
I'll tell you, it's funny. If Tim Raines, all right, he didn't have the big home run numbers, but he's, you know what? 3,000 hits is sort of like an automatic as well. And he had 2,605 hits. But what gets lost on that is that he had 1,330 walks. Can you imagine if he was just a little bit more of a hacker? Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? He easily would have made that, that 3,000 hit mark, and then boom. I mean, I'm sorry, but I look at his numbers, I look at his career, and I consider him far superior to Lou Brock. Lou Brock, he stole a lot of bases. He had a good batting average, but he didn't walk. He struck out a lot. He wasn't a power hitter. And Tim Raines, earlier in his career, was actually a pretty good defensive player. His defense only started to decline in the late 80s. And even, and other people say, well, he hung around, but you know what? He still had some pretty decent years as what you would say, a guy who hung around. I mean, with Chicago, the first year in Chicago, for Raines, it wasn't a great year, but his second year in Chicago, he played 144 games. He hit 294. He's got, his on base average was 380. It was after that where, he was either injured or they were resting him as well. But he still had high on base percentage, pretty decent batting averages, and he, his power actually picked up just a little bit as well, but he still, it wasn't like he was hanging around and got people were waiting. He was useful. He certainly helped the Yankees. He was part of two championship teams with the Yankees. I mean, to me, it's kind of it's crazy that he had to wait 15 years. It just boggles my mind.
I agree. I want to ask, but I know we don't have tons of time here, but I want to touch on a couple things. Edgar Martinez, guys, where do we stand on this?
He should, as far as I'm concerned, he should be in the Hall of Fame. If we're gonna have closers in the Hall of Fame, which I have zero issue with closers being in the Hall of Fame, I don't think there's anything wrong with another specialist being in the Hall of Fame in the DH. And if David Ortiz is a Hall of Fame player, and I believe David Ortiz should be a Hall of Fame player, then Edgar Martinez should be a Hall of Fame player too. It seemed like he did well enough on the ballot this year to where perhaps we see him get in the next few years, but I don't know. I remember whenever Edgar Martinez came up, I just assumed he was going to hit a double against the Rangers, and most times it seemed like he did, even though the numbers don't bear out that 80% of the time he doubled. But he was just a remarkable hitter, and he played a part of some great lineups, and I don't know if that gets held against him at all. Because he wasn't the star in some of those Mariners lineups, according to some, but I don't know. I think Edgar Martinez is a Hall of Famer for my money.
I totally agree. What do you think?
I'll tell you. Do I put him way up on the charts? Yes, no way. You got to be crazy not to vote him in. But I do say he's a Hall of Famer. To me, he just goes over the scale, but he is a Hall of Famer. And here's another guy who, not only was he hitting 40 and 50 doubles a year, but he was hitting 20-something homers a year for a number of years, hit 37 even one year. And another guy that routinely walked 90, 100 times a year. He finished his career with 1,283 walks. So yes, he is a Hall of Famer. And that's a very good point you make, Jared. Also, if they're going to have closers in the Hall of Fame, yes, they should definitely have DHs in the Hall of Fame.
So Vlad will make it next year. Hoffman makes it next year. Does Mussina make it at some point, guys?
I don't. If I had a bet on it, I don't think he gets in, and I don't know where I stand on that yet. There are a lot of numbers, a lot of comparisons that suggest he should get in. And I think what gets lost, the biggest thing for me that gets lost in Mussina's candidacy is that this guy never played in a pitch. His home team never was a pitcher-friendly ballpark. He playing in Baltimore and then going to New York, and I just, he always played. That division was typically pretty tough while he was playing.
Always.
So I was always, this one for me is more of maybe an emotional thing. I, for whatever reason, always loved Mike Mussina. I think it's because, and I'm not joking, I love crossword puzzles, and he is a huge crossword puzzle guy. And so I think, but I'm serious. That was like one of those things when I was younger that kind of made me like this guy. And so, I would advocate for him to get more consideration, but I don't know if I can support it enough to where I would be angry or devastated if he didn't get in. But I definitely, I guess what I would do is I would feel strongly enough to encourage writers who did not vote for him to take a second or third look and maybe present them with some information that could sway their opinion. But, I don't think he's a no-brainer. I think Edgar Martinez is more deserving. If I had one chip to play, I would play it for Edgar Martinez over Mike Mussina.
I tell you, if you're using the one chip argument, I would use it for Martinez. But again, I think Mussina just rises above the line. So, and Trevor Hoffman, and it's, you talk about, I'm sorry, but like, to me, he had over 600 saves, but I felt as though that was a huge accumulation. Never didn't, he wasn't in the postseason a lot, but didn't pitch well in the postseason. I never looked at him as like, wow, like here he is, lights out. And, as a matter of fact, like when I think about it, like I kind of remember his saves always being, how can I say it? Well, I guess the best way to say it, if I was a Padre fan, I would say his saves were scary.
That's not my recollection, but I didn't see too many of his ball games, but the number alone, he wasn't a compiler. He wasn't like he hung around for years. He got out of baseball when it was time to leave. That number is an astonishing number. I hate to be blind to, anything beyond that, but he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. He missed by 4 or 5 votes. He clearly will be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if I agree with you there, Wayne. That's a lot of saves.
It is a lot of saves. Yeah,
Wayne, I don't agree either. I don't know. Maybe I'm off here too, but unless we're going to consider closers differently than we consider other pitchers, I think for a significant portion of Trevor Hoffman's career, he was one of the 3 or 4 best closers in baseball. I know that we have closers that one year are great and then the next year they stink. And you have plenty of guys who, maybe their best year was better than Trevor Hoffman's, but they only lasted for 2 years. And I do think, Tim Raines in a similar way, I mean, he compiled stats. You know, I don't, not to compare Tim Raines and Trevor Hoffman directly, but Tim Raines' numbers they look better on paper because he hung around a little bit. And you know, I get, you know, there are two schools of thoughts with closers. You know, you got the old school closer, and people believe that, you know, the modern day closer just is even more of it's like a specialized specialist because they only throw one inning. And you know, I get that, you know, that maybe it's not as tough to perform that task these days than it was back in the Goose Gossage era, or, you know, what have you. But man, to me, I always thought of Trevor Hoffman as one of the premier closers in baseball. And I don't know if he gets looked at differently because his best pitch was a changeup, and he didn't throw 98, 99 miles an hour. But I don't know. I think of Trevor Hoffman as a Hall of Famer. And I don't know. I would put Trevor Hoffman over Mike Messina if I had you know, put those two up against one another. I just think he was one of the premier closers for a long enough chunk of time to where I think, yeah, he did compile numbers perhaps, but I don't think that he was compiling numbers in a way that misrepresents how dominant he was.
Well, you know what? Maybe part of the demon here in my argument is the fact that the save stat is such a BS stat to begin with. I mean, think about it. You come into the ninth inning with with bases empty, nobody out, and like nobody on, and you got to get 3 outs, or you can actually keep the save. You can even give up runs while you come in to preserve a lead. You can give up runs and still get the save. Or, I mean, so to me, maybe it's also the stat itself, but I don't know if it was so much that his pitch was the changeup, but I just there was just something about him. Like I say, I was always nervous. You know, like I shouldn't say nervous, but like anytime he came into pitch a night, and it's not like I watched him a ton, but but I'd say from 2000 on, I got to watch him quite a bit. You know, with cable TV, with ESPN, with late night ball games. I got to watch him a decent amount, and I remember him giving up the long ball. Maybe it's perception. I don't know. I guess I would have to pull up his stats and take a look, but it's just the way I feel about him.
Though, right?
So, but
previously, I feel like for these other cases, we kind of agreed on most. But I mean, I think the real beauty of sports in general, baseball specifically, and the Hall of Fame even more specifically of that, is a situation like this where we're not on the same side of the fence. And I think there's so much information we have these days, so many different ways to analyze and assess players, that you do, I think, in a lot of cases for these fringe guys, find people who are split. And I mean, I not that I don't enjoy when we all agree, and we have the same frame of mind when it comes to Tim Raines or Edgar Martinez, but I think it's the Trevor Hoffmans of the world, and for a lot of people, the Edgar Martinezes of the world, that make this really enjoyable and fascinating, because there are a lot of ways to spin the data and the information we have to fit our argument. And the reality is there's probably no right answer. It ultimately gets decided by writers, but with all due respect to the writers, there's so many people beyond this group of voting writers who have such a great understanding and hold of baseball, and baseball not only in this most recent era, but eras dating back before that. But I think, the discussion is really what makes this, not to sound too dramatic, but a beautiful sport. And, there's so many different things and ways we can discuss the sport, and Hall of Fame candidacy is certainly one of them.
Now, real quick, I know you got to go. So if you had a Hall of Fame ballot this year, what would it look like?
Let me pull up, I'll tell you what, I'll pull up the, people quickly, but I would definitely have had the guys who were in. I have zero issue with Pudge or Tim Raines or Jeff Bagwell. Edgar Martinez would have been on mine. Vladimir Guerrero would have been on mine. Trevor Hoffman would have been on mine. And, like I said earlier, Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds would be on my ballot. Those two definitely would be on my ballot. I would probably put Moose over Curt Schilling if I put one of those two. But I think I'd be okay if my ballot ended at Barry Bonds, with Bagwell, Raines, Pudge, Hoffman, Guerrero, Martinez, Clemens, Bonds. Like I said, I think Mike Messina's a coin flip, but, and I know that I would still get a few more votes beyond those guys, but I'd probably cut it off this year at Barry Bonds.
Hey, can I just throw a name out? Can I just throw a name out there for you? McGriff, Fred McGriff.
I knew you were going to say that.
I don't think it's fair. This guy gets no play whatsoever. Am I missing? What am I missing here? I thought
that's a fair question.
He's a great ball player.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Yeah. Right?
You know what? I'll tell you, it's fair because, the perception is that he played clean. That's pretty, and
he might be one of those guys that ultimately is getting screwed. If in fact he did play clean, his numbers, while very good, were probably outdone by guys who we believe to have used performance-enhancing drugs. I don't know that he ever hit, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but I don't know that he ever hit more than 36 home runs in a season, which during his era kind of probably put him like 10th to 12th in the league. Now that you're probably top 5 in your respective league if you hit 36 home runs, but throughout the 90s, when the numbers were really booming, he was overshadowed, and I got to believe that probably impacts him negatively. Though, if you look at the numbers, as you guys kind of indicate, I mean, 493 home runs is just nothing to ignore, and he was a near 900 OPS guy and played on some really good teams too. I mean, he was a big part of those Braves lineups in the 90s that did the damage that they did. So yeah. He is that's a really interesting case. I guess I'd have to read a little more, and I'd love to hear from the voters who didn't vote for him, why they decided not to, and from the voters who did vote for him, why they decided to vote for him. That's an interesting case.
Yeah. He's probably the Gil Hodges of modern times.
Might be. You're right.
Yeah.
Very similar
comparison. Yeah.
Very similar.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, this is
Jared,
to be continued.
Yes. Jared, I know you got to go, but let's try to get you back. Let's see, where are we? January, February, March. Let's try to get you back like in the middle of March. I'm assuming you'll be in Arizona.
I'll be in Arizona. That means I will be dealing with the redundancy of spring training, so I'd be more than happy to come on with you guys then.
Right.
Excellent, and and be prepared to give some inside tips to all our fantasy baseball guys.
Oh, with my pleasure. I'd love to.
All right, Jared. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. Have a great night.
My pleasure, guys.
Take care,
well.
Jared.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So Craig, what's your Hall of Fame ballot look like?
I'm sure it's pretty similar to everybody else's. Trevor Hoffman makes the Hall of Fame in my eyes. Martinez makes the Hall of Fame in my eyes. I still hold out. I don't put Bonds and Clemens in yet. I'm sorry. I'm not this holy roller. At some point they have to get in, but I've got no problem with them having to wait. McGriff, McGriff and Mussina are very similar in my eyes. And I at one point thought that Mussina was clearly not a Hall of Famer, but I went back and, I mean, the statistics are pretty remarkable. He's 120 games over 500. I just think back to, I mean, game after game, American League East. I mean, any time I played the Red Sox, he was pitching against Pedro. He was a great pitcher, and he could very easily have hung around and compiled.
Exactly, easily. He won 20 games in his last year.
Right, he needed 30 wins in the next. He could have hung around and gotten 15 a year for 2 years, and he would have been at 300, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I just thought he was, like Jared said, he pitched in two batter-friendly ballparks and played well and pitched. I mean, he was great. I loved him. And McGriff also. I mean, for me, the trickiest thing about McGriff is, does he go in as a Yankee or as an Atlanta Brave? He's a great ball player. I think Fred McGriff's a Hall of Famer. So, what are your thoughts?
Man, it's something I would have to, weigh, but again, I have no problem if he got in. I would have to really dig beyond, the peripheral stats, even going beyond the on base, the slugging, but I tend to lean ever so slightly for him going in. So, I mean, I think he had like 8 or 9 seasons with over 30 home runs. Probably had around that with 100 RBIs, and probably had a bunch of seasons with 90 plus RBIs. So, I would lean toward him going in. Let me ask you something. I don't know if we've discussed this before, but what do you think of Jack Morris as a Hall of Famer? And he's off the ballot. He missed it.
Yeah, Jack Morris, in my eyes, was a Hall of Famer. And I know stat-wise, he may not be there, but he was one of the best pitchers of his era. And I think when all's said and done, I mean, you think about him doing it in Detroit, and you think about him doing it in Minnesota, and you think about him doing it in Toronto. He was a great pitcher. He's a Hall of Famer. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I mean, and Detroit was a hitter's park when he pitched, and Minnesota was the Metrodome. That was another hitter's park, and Toronto was a hitter's park.
Well, if I remember correctly, the big knock on him was his ERA. I mean, he gave up
exactly.
Runs. But he was. Yeah. I mean, there was a time when if you needed a game one, he was one of the pitchers you wish you'd had on your side. He was a great pitcher. I think that's a mistake not having Jack Morris in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I agree, and he was also a great postseason pitcher. I mean, he pitched. He arguably pitched the best postseason complete game, World Series complete game ever.
Yep. I remember that World Series. That was quite a ball game.
No, I agree. He was like for year in and year out. He was, and he stumbled a little bit for a couple of years in Detroit, became a free agent, and then went to Minnesota. He won 18 games and took them to the World Series, and then went to Toronto. He won 20 games, and then they won Did they win the World Series? And then they won the World Series in '92 as well.
Right.
So, but yeah. Hey, listen, we're getting close to spring training.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty wild. I looked at the calendar. We're a month away. That's not too bad. Not too shabby. I'm not all that optimistic about our Yankees, but I tend to never be optimistic about anything. I'm not crazy about the pitching. It's very interesting that the New York, the tabloids are already talking about 2018 and Bryce Harper and Manny Machado. I look forward to that. And the Yankees youngsters and everything, but I'm not happy with the pitching. So we'll see how that pans out. And go ahead, tell me I'm wrong.
No, I'm not. You know what? I'm not gonna tell you I'm wrong. I can't say I'm optimistic about the pitching. And actually, I'm not that optimistic about the offense. I mean, I'm looking for 2017 to be like a growing pains kind of year. But I just hope they continue to exercise patience, and I hope their business model is, continued development. So let Aaron Judge, let him go up there, let him strike out 170, 200 times. I think it'll be worth it. Although I think I've said this before as well, I'm higher on Clint Frazier. I think Clint Frazier has a higher ceiling than Aaron Judge, but like I said, let him go through the growing pains. That's all, I did see, I don't know, I think I mentioned this, that there was a stat about, and I think I told you it's called deserved runs, and Michael Pineda ranks, or undeserved runs, the bottom line is, Michael Pineda ranked, I believe, like in the top 10, in other words, like he didn't deserve what he got, so to speak, the way they analyzed, the ball. Now, sometimes, the way things were hit, the way plays were made, and it's an interesting statistic, and but again, it's just another way to analyze things, just like they analyze, batted balls in play and exit velocity, and it's just amazing now that like the video can even analyze how many times a ball rotates out of the pitcher's hand to the plate. It's just absolutely amazing. So that you could break it down and you could say, yeah, well, of course, they're hitting your curveball, or because it's not spinning enough. It's it was spinning more last week or 2 starts ago. Yeah, your slider's not breaking. It's not rotating enough. It's just it's just amazing. It's amazing. So. Yeah. And what about the Mets? I tell you what, generally it's been very quiet on the New York front anyway, as far as any kind of baseball moves. Is like, there's really been no news on the New York front. I guess the biggest story this week, besides the Hall of Fame, is that Jose Bautista misjudged his market and is going back to Toronto for it's $18 million a year, and I think there's 2 mutual option years. And supposedly he was originally looking for $150 million for 3 years. Yeah. Now, although he denies it, he said that wasn't the number. But I do believe, but I wouldn't be, I wouldn't. If he said that the number was less than 100 million for 5 years, I wouldn't believe that. Not at all. And and the NL and the AL home run leaders are still out there as free agents. Chris Carter and Mark Trumbo, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you think about it, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But
and Mike Napoli's out there. I believe he hit 30 home runs this year.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I would think that I would like the Yankees to pick him up.
Which one?
Because
Trumbo or Carter?
I'd like Napoli because I don't know I don't know if Bird is 100% healthy. I don't know what the deal with Bird is, but Napoli can hit. I like Napoli.
Napoli can hit. Go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, does Napoli play third?
No.
No. All right.
No.
So much.
He's not a bad first baseman, but he doesn't play third. You remember years ago he was a catcher.
Right.
He was originally a catcher, but no, I tell you what, I wouldn't want to see the Yankees pick up Napoli. I like Tyler Austin, and I think he's someone that came up, hit, and then he nosedived a little bit, and then he came back. He adjusted. I like that Tyler Austin adjusted. So I'm okay with them going into the season with Austin and Bird. I'm okay. It's fine. You know what? I'll let him go through the growing pains. There's always first base DH types out there every year.
All right. So, well, we'll pick this up next week.
We will. Are we going to have? Are we having Mr. Peterson return next week?
I believe next week is the return of Vic Peterson.
Excellent. Okay. Very good.
So have a good week. And we'll meet back here next week.
Sounds great. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good week.